the president is and will be always majority a figurehead of the country. You get what I'm saying? Like, we need somebody to point to when it's a situation to be like, that was your fault. But it's really like, there's so much more things that's complicated than just being like president. You get what I'm saying?
All right, chat, let's go meet for meat in chat, bro.
Hey boy, whoa, why are you talking to me like that?
Welcome back to the live channel. Today is gonna be me, it's gonna be chat, and we'll be reacting to a video from the one, the only, the homie, Decoy Voice. They're just going to ignore this, ... And this is about the Delta plane situation flipping over and all that.
Delta Airlines plane flipped over while landing at Pearson International
Your
Airport
bet is calling
in
you.
Toronto,
Yeah, I'm
Canada.
clicked, bro.
It has now been reported the Delta flight was operated by Endeavour Air, who has a history of boasting about unmanned flights. But not drones, just planes staffed entirely by women. As Endeavour Air's website lists their most important behaviors with...
Yo, that's crazy, because I know this is giving fuel to the fire for people who are like, girls can't park anyways. Like, this is the craziest girls can't park situation if this was an all-girl staff. Do I agree with that? No, I know plenty of girls who could park vehicles amazing. I'm just saying that this would be a crazy situation if it was all shorties.
Safety on top, but also promoting diversity and inclusion in all aspects of their airline. And sadly, this is just the cycle we'll likely see after every catastrophe going forward. The right will dig up their company's push for diversity and inclusion, and the left will ignore that and just try to pin this on President Trump. The real question being, what exactly caused this crash, and how can we prevent it again? As obviously some things can be blamed on the lowering of standards for employment just for the sake of promoting diversity, but not everything can be attributed to it, as Endeavour Air's social media posts featuring their all-female crews are getting bombarded with basically the same response.
Nah, that's crazy. The internet, yo. I'm not gonna lie, this is messed up. Let me say this first and foremost. That is messed up for them to do. Second of all, I gotta respect a good joke. I gotta respect a good joke. That's a good joke.
Until they had to turn off the replies. But in actuality, there is no evidence this particular flight into Toronto had no men. And Endeavour's roster of female pilots is actually pretty standard for the industry. So a lot of things can be chalked up to who they hired to run their social media. As I've known people that work at those firms that run social media accounts for celebrities and companies. And they're the exact types that would try to highlight DEI beyond the levels of diversity the company actually contained. As one, they have
it's like when those colleges, like, what are the colleges with mad white people called? Like, you know, you got HBCUs and then you got like the predominantly white Jones. I forgot what they're called. But it's like when you go to those colleges and then they see you reading a book around like 2 or 3 white people and then they're like, hey, can we get a picture of you? It's for like the diversity. So PWIs, appreciate you. When you go to the PWIs, they try to make it and frame it like there's more diversity there than there really is, and it probably is the same situation that happened at that airline. I get it.
What consumers actually find important, as oftentimes they themselves live in these liberal bubbles on social media, where they genuinely believe people pick airplanes based on the pilot's race, gender, and preferences in bed. But 2, social media accounts are deceptive by design, as nobody posts their reality, they only post what they want you to think. The problem being, how much of this company's money and focus are going into promoting this image of themselves, as opposed to what should be their top priority in safety. As the speculation is, and we have no way of confirming this right now, but I blurred out the images for privacy just in case. But the first officer on that flight allegedly just got her license a month ago, and the air traffic control flight recording had the captain on the radio during the landing. If true, this sounds like some pretty important information. If only Delta Airlines would verify if this is what possibly caused that crash, we would know if they're making the correct preventative measures for next time. But their silence is very telling, which is what makes me think they're doing the same thing they did with the Black Hawk helicopter crash in DC, as that was in everybody's news feed for about a week. But we never got definitive answers as to who was flying, why they were so high, and why there was only one ATC working what should have been 2 roles. They just waited out the news cycle until everybody started talking about Trump's constitutional crisis and hope we'd forget.
Constitutional crisis.
Constitutional crisis.
Constitutional crisis.
Constitutional crisis.
A constitution.
It's like they definitely moved everything forward. I will say the amount of news reports now that we're getting with the plane crashes is definitely closer to fear-mongering than actual reports. There is like a scary side to it with the planes, but as you will notice, most of the stuff is not commercial. Most of the things are not commercial. It's single man or two-man or privately owned things that's happening, and that's a little weird. I do think that's weird. Just something to keep your eye on.
Constitutional crisis.
Constitutional crisis.
And the sad part is, if Delta just keeps their head down for a bit, I imagine the public, for the most part, will just forget and move on.
Shoot, I
But this
forgot.
isn't how we should treat airline safety. As I covered it in the last video that is now mysteriously gone, I don't know what happened, but let's just do a super brief recap. The crash occurred and the left immediately tried to blame Trump for what happened in Canada. NBC echoed that sentiment.
I did want to, underscore, to pick up on the conversation you were just having, though, in terms of the recent string of aviation incidents, Tom. This is going to, yet again, raise the concern about FAA staffing, air traffic control staff.
The thing is with like people raising concern and they're pointing this towards Trump, it's just a sign of the times, bro, because if a different president on the other side was inaugurated and he was like in here too doing the same things, they would have just pointed to him. It doesn't even really matter, bro. Like the president is and will be always majority a figurehead of the country. You get what I'm saying? Like we need somebody to point to when it's a situation to be like, that was your fault. But it's really like there's so much more things that's complicated than just being like president. You get what I'm saying? Like it definitely could include it, but I don't think the either side is better than the other side for saying which president was able to do what. Like they both would have said the same thing underneath the right scenarios, the right conditions, all because their presidential candidate that they don't want is in office. Did that make sense? I kind of butchered that explanation, I'm not gonna lie.
Staffing. Now, this is a
Here
Canadian
goes
air
the
traffic
yapping.
control tower,
Oh,
and this is under Canadian authority once it crosses the border. And yet, as you know, there has been this talk about maybe staff cuts at the FAA as a part of President Trump's effort to trim down the federal workforce. And yet, as you also know, the FAA has been complaining for years that they are understaffed in critical job positions, especially air traffic control.
Until it came out
What's up,
that
Stanley?
nobody in
What's good,
safety
psych?
was let go of.
The AP reporting employees that are being laid off are on probationary status, so it's easier to lay them off because they're still on probation. They include radar, landing, and navigational aid maintenance. But isn't there already a shortage at the FAA? Why do this now, especially considering what's happened in the States, and now, of course, you have this other incident and a few others?
Yeah, well, this one happened in Canada, but
Yes.
I can only tell you what the Secretary of Transportation says. There are 45,000 employees at the FAA. We're talking about fewer than 400 people, and he says 0 air traffic controllers and critical safety personnel were let go. So if that's true, I don't really have a problem with it, to be honest with you. I do like the idea of keeping the people who are in the direct chain of command of safety and the air traffic control system and so on and so forth. But
you know why I'm actually okay with that too? It's not crazy the mess up that they had to let whatever situation happen. It's more of the fact that if you play your chances, it's really hard to believe that they let that happen twice.
I have a hard time believing that there is a single
Bro, I
government
tried joining
agency
the
that
Discord,
doesn't
but it
have
said invite invalid.
a
I got
bloat
you.
of
Hold on one second.
administrative personnel that we could probably do without. And I think that's why a lot of voters are happy that Donald Trump and
There you
Elon
go,
Musk
Brody.
are finally going through the federal government and trying to take out some of this bureaucracy that we probably just don't need. So I'm reading to you what Sean Duffy says. He's the Secretary of the Transportation. I have no reason to doubt his numbers.
Not to mention the initial point that this occurred in Canada, which isn't where our FAA operates, it's Canada's TCAA. But the left's
Of course,
rationalization
family.
doesn't have to make sense. It just has to end on blaming Trump. And with that in mind, I don't want to turn into the right's version of leftist delusion, where absolutely everybody gets their job and results of forced inclusion. As for all we know, these ladies could be the very top of their class with tens of thousands of flight hours. Because sadly, all these DEI initiatives just make minority accomplishments questionable. But the only way to fix that is when a company focuses purely on skills with zero emphasis on inclusion. As when you see a female lead engineer at SpaceX, you know she's the best of the best and earned that position. But if she was a lead engineer at Delta, it's sadly going to be seen with a little bit of skepticism, as even on their own website, they measure their success through representation, sharing graphs about how many women they employ at each level, putting out social media posts about all the women they have on their flights.
The thing though,
and even to today,
the thing though about like those graphs like that, and it's not even to, I don't necessarily know the point bro's trying to make. The thing with graphs like that is that other graphs will show you that if you do change it to a graph where there's no DEI hires, right? If that's the argument that's being made here, and like it is only now people that's the top of the class, you're making the argument that people hire people based on the fact that they're the top of their class. When people will tell you right now, the majority of the ways that you get a job is if you're lucky or if you know somebody. And that's pretty much how you get a job. It's never been about being at the top of your class ever. It's just about being at the top of your class now because it makes sense as a DEI hire. But number two, the reason that it doesn't work with it being at the top of your class, statistically, as a black person with a black sounding name and a white person with a white sounding name, there's a white person, there's a white person, there's a white person with a felony. There's a black person, there's a black person with a felony. When you go and you're applying to a job with the same qualifications, with the same background, with the same amount of knowledge, with the same years spent doing your craft, a Caucasian person statistically with a felony has the same chance as getting that job as a black person without a felony. Without a felony. So because of that, that's why the argument of you don't know if it's the best person for the job falls on mute ears. Because it's never been about, is it the best person for the job? It's always been about who you know over what you know. And if we can't find anybody that you know, then we'll try to find somebody who's about who you know. Just a little food for thought. Just because people use the argument that it's about the best hire when it's never been about the best hire. That's not ever been the case. It's never been the case. Plenty of people start off doing jobs that they don't know. Plenty of people start off doing jobs lying on resume and they just get good at the job. And further, if you are a nigga and you got hired, especially if you look like a nigga, you're probably really good at your job to the point where they hired you. No cap. So that's why the whole thing is a whole thing. I'm not gonna lie, but I would be a liar if I told you that I am proficient in this space. I just know what I know. I am a YouTuber and I sleep for a lot of the time of the day, and the times where I'm not sleeping, I'm working on animations. But I'm just saying though, real talk.
Posting on their planes how they're the best DEI place to work for disability inclusion. You would assume between 2023 and now, they would think to remove all this DEI branding, especially whenever something goes wrong. It brings these companies so much criticism that they actually have to block the comments from the public, because I understand. Although releasing the information on who was doing what inside that airplane could exonerate Endeavor or Delta's DEI policies, but you also don't want to name individuals as you don't want the angry online mobs coming after them. But as long as these companies keep emphasizing inclusion on the front end and refusing to acknowledge or even blocking any criticism on the back end, people are always going to assume the worst. When all I want is for them to identify whatever caused the accident and let us know how they can fix it. But if you appreciate my concise, lighthearted commentary,
W video, man, I appreciate the knowledge, I appreciate the commentary, man. If you guys enjoyed the video, make sure you like, comment, subscribe down below. And there's 2 reactions a day on this channel, 1 animation weekly on the animation channel, and I'm gonna catch y'all in the next one. Hire black people. That's the end. All right, bye, peace.